there's so many things that are different about it, but I think the main thing that really makes it very successful is the culture of Garza High School. Has incorporated the solution-focused approach. Now, that can sound kind of abstract to people, but what we do there is we teach the teachers and the principal and everyone, the social workers, the counselors, everyone that works there, how to have a solution-focused conversation with youth.
That is Simply Focus with Elfie Cherney and Dominic Goddard for Live Enjoy.
Are you ready for this new episode? Then please welcome your hosts, Elfie Cherney and Dominic Goddard.
Hello. We're happy to be back again.
We are here on Zoom with Cynthia Franklin. Hi, Cynthia.
Hello, Elfie. Hello, Dominic.
It's so great to see you again after we saw each other at the SFPTA conference in Montreal and had a wonderful lunch together.
Yes.
And we're still sorry that we didn't meet each other during our journey when we passed through Austin and Texas, because you're living in this beautiful hill country that we enjoyed so much, and you're there right now, right?
I am there. I'm staying at home, and I'm here working from home in the hill country. And next time you come, you will definitely come. And I saw many pictures of your travels, and I'm just sorry that didn't work out. Next time.
Next time for sure, yeah. So Cynthia, you're Associate Dean for Doctoral Education and Steinberg Spencer Family Professor of Mental Health at the Steve Hicks School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Austin. And you've spent your career really chasing the evidence base of solution-focused brief therapy and solution-focus in schools. You are a big supporter of SF and really doing a lot of research with that and about that. And you were the first one who brought solution focus into alternative schools. And we're so thrilled to talk about that today on the podcast. So to start with, what fascinates you with solution focus?
Well, there's so much that fascinates me with solution focus, but the main thing that fascinated me with it is how it focused on the strengths of people. When I first saw it in operation, I thought, this is wonderful, because instead of focusing on problems, it amplifies the solutions in the lives of people and their strengths. And this is what I thought people often needed that came into therapy, or came into counseling situations. And I also saw how this could work very well in school settings. This is something you could just do in a conversation with people, and that anyone, I believed, could be taught to do it like a first aid kit with youth. And then therapists could also work in a team with other people in schools like teachers and principals. And I thought this would be a wonderful way to help youth.
And you say when you first saw it, when was that? When did you first see it, and how did you get in touch with the solution focus?
Well, I was trained as a family therapist. And so I got some of my continuing education from the family therapy. I went at the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy meeting in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I did that because I really wanted to go to Santa Fe. Honestly, I wasn't that interested in the programs that much. I'll be honest about it. However, I got into the solution-focused workshop there. And that's where I really learned about it in the early 90s, that it had been around, for maybe 15 years or something when I first really encountered it. And I learned it there in that workshop. And I just knew that it was a natural fit for me. And, in my field of social work, we do emphasize a lot the training of people about strengths, working on the strengths of people. And so when I saw that in operation, I thought this is just a whole technology for how to do this, that's been worked out. And so that's where I saw it, in operation. There was Tracy Todd, who is now the executive director of AMFT here in the United States. He was the one doing the workshop.
And then you started to apply it at school. So what were your first steps there, and how did that evolve?
Well, my dissertation research and everything I did as a practitioner was mainly in child and adolescent mental health. And I worked in psychiatry and therapy with a lot of at-risk kids that had mental disorders and lots of family struggles and family problems. And so when I got into my work, in my research more as a practitioner and as a researcher and getting my doctoral degree, I actually had an alternative school in a university setting. We wrote a grant and had it there. And that's a wonderful story in itself. But that set me up really for doing the solution-focused therapy in a school setting, because we actually was working now in alternative school settings. And so when I learned it in the early 90s, I said, this will be a great intervention for youth agencies or for work in these alternative schools. So that's how I first got involved in it. I was actually working with kids that were homeless and runaway youth in the youth agency. And so we applied it there. And that's when I did the first studies on it. And then as I was working there, and it went on until a few years, in about 2001, they were trying to create Garza High School in Austin, Texas. And so they contacted me, the principal and the school social worker, and she asked if I would come over there and help them build a solution-focused school. And that was the principal's idea because she saw the school social worker who worked there do solution-focused brief therapy in that school. And it was just like a miracle to her. She was trying to deal with a child that had adolescent attendance problems. And the school social worker came in and did the solution-focused therapy in front of her and turned the student around in just 15 minutes conversation. And so the principal, Victoria Baldwin, who was the founding principal of Garza High School, she said, I want that. I don't know what it is, but I definitely want that. And the school social worker said, well, I learned it from Cynthia Franklin because she was training school social workers about solution-focused brief therapy and working in these youth agencies. And so if you want it, we'd have to try to get her over here in Garza. So she called me and said, will you come? We're trying to build a solution-focused school, Cynthia. Would you help us? And of course, I was delighted, to be able to get back working in an alternative school because I'd worked in the one, like I said, in my doctoral work. And so this was a great opportunity, that was being created here in Austin to do the solution-focused approach in an alternative school setting.
Wow. And for the last almost 20 years, Garza High School has really been a huge success. And there is a book about it, Solution-Focused Brief Therapy in Alternative Schools. There's another book, Solution-Focused Brief Therapy in Schools, where you co-authored. There are numerous studies on solution-focused brief therapy in schools. So really an evidence-based there. And we're thrilled to hear and also to see the differences it makes. So what is different at Garza High School than maybe in other high schools?
Well, that's a wonderful question. What's different about it? And, there's so many things that are different about it. But I think the main thing that really makes it very successful is the culture of Garza High School, has incorporated the solution-focused approach. Now, that can sound kind of abstract to people, but what we do there is we teach the teachers and the principal and everyone, the social workers, the counselors, everyone that works there, how to have a solution-focused conversation with youth. And so we apply the principles of the solution-focused brief therapy. So we apply the strengths perspective, for example. We apply, the mindset of solution-focused brief therapy, which is like a growth mindset, which is basically a belief that people can change. And that was very much a part of the solution-focused brief therapy. These days in education, they call that a growth mindset. The solution-focused brief therapy had that all along. The idea that, inside people, they can change. Enzu Kim Berg really believed in building the competencies of people. In her work, that's what she did, and that's what she taught me. And so we created an environment then where people could have a conversation with a student that would be very positive and competency-based, and where we could build them toward a solution, and we could build their strengths and focus on that. And it just makes the students shine really there. In this book, Solution-Focused Brief Therapy in Alternative Schools that we created about Garza, we tell many stories about how youth changed, and how they're affected by the solution-focused conversations, by using things like exception questions, focusing on the future, miracle questions, being able to help people come up with their own solutions instead of telling them what to do. These are the kinds of things that are done there. And they really, really, really shine through this. They really turn around. And so that is part of what really helped us create the Garza High School. And so that's why it's been going on for 20 years. It keeps going on, even though we had a principal change from Victoria Baldwin to Dr. Linda Webb. It's gotten even better under her leadership, I think. That's been an amazing thing to me to see how much it's affected not only the students there, but people all over the world.
And coming to people from all over the world. So people from all over the world came to visit Garza High School to have a look at it, to experience it really right there. So what do the people who visited Garza observe and say what inspires them? And well, maybe, what emerged out of that?
Well, we've had many people would come and they would either observe for, a day, or they would come and then, people even from Europe would come and they came for a whole week. You may know Professor Kinhaus from Netherlands, and he came and he brought a group and he came for the whole week. And we've had people from Japan come for several days. And what they all say is that Garza is very inspirational to them. They can see that it's a school that can really take youth when they're not doing well in school, when they're failing, when they're dropped out, when they have difficulties, and then turn them around so they become very enthusiastic about their education. They have goals. They believe that they can go to college, or to post-secondary education. And so they all talk about that. And what they see is more of an experience that we create for them. Starbucks creates an experience, and that's why people like it, because they have an experience there. And so we create that type of experience for them, and that we do that in the teaching and in the counseling and the day-to-day operations. If you go into that school, you can feel the positive emotional environment in it. Now, this is something that's not real concrete, but if you ask yourself, why do I like to go to Starbucks? Why do I like to talk to the people there or get my coffee there and work there from the coffee shop like that? And it might not just be Starbucks, it could be other coffee shops too. That's one of the things that's a part of Garza High School, because the solution-focused approach does create the positive emotion around people. And so that type of vibe is very important. And they observe things too, about how we do curriculums differently, how we, do the self-paced curriculums, how that the curriculums are very goal-directed types of curriculums. They observe messages that we give to people that we're not going to let them fail as long as they do their part. We're going to make sure that they succeed. It's things like that that really make a difference. Of course, they're going to observe a team approach. In my work, I call it a transdisciplinary team. And that's where you team people from different professions and disciplines and help them learn critical skills that they need to be effective with young people or do their work by sharing your knowledge and being willing to participate together. So it's not unusual, for example, for a teacher to use solution-focused counseling techniques like ask an exception question or know how to talk that way to students. And at the same time, it's not unusual for a social worker to go into the classroom to help a teacher. So this type of teaming. And then we have a team meeting too, and I can tell you more about that. It's in the book, but how we put a whole team approach around every student in that school.
You're talking about exception questions. Could you give us maybe an example of how exception questions are used in this context, like a concrete example?
Well, I can give you an example of an exception question from like a teacher, in the classroom that was working with a student that had difficulty with word problems. That's something where you do in math. This is a math teacher now, and she could do math, but she had difficulty with word problems. And so she had anxiety disorder and anxiety. So she would, get very frustrated when the word problems would come up, and she would even I call it a meltdown, which she would escalate and, start really raising her voice, screaming, sometimes walking out of the classroom, just things like this. So the teacher was always trying to regulate her emotions. These are often youth we work with that have adverse childhood experiences or they have difficulties emotionally. And so she was doing this. So she waited till the student was calm, and she went and talked to her about the word problem, and she coached her through the word problem. And she asked this question in the midst of doing this, and she said, well, tell me sometime, when you have been successful in doing word problem. And she thought about it, and she couldn't really think of the exact answer, but she thought of a time when she did better. And so the teacher went with that. And then, that changed the tenor around with the students so that she could work on the word problems. And the end of that story is, as told by the teacher, was that after she did the exception with the student actually said to the teacher, I think I could just teach this. I could tutor this if I just stopped being anxious and just, look at the problems like this. And so this is what we want to happen in these students. We want them to have a change in thinking and feeling about their abilities.
And isn't it amazing what we can do with putting the focus just in a different direction and invite people to a dialogue about what's working or about moments when they are better? Every time I hear it, I'm in awe of hearing stories like that. So
Yes.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many other stories around the world. So Garza High School is a shining example. And there are other people applying solution focus in schools. And you've been very active in doing research and also in pulling together all those studies that have been done on this topic. And you wrote some wonderful articles about the evidence base of solution-focused brief therapy in schools. So what works there? What can we really tell people out there about the evidence of solution-focused brief therapy in schools?
Well, that's a great question. It has been the passion of my career to see solution-focused brief therapy not only be applied in schools, but to show that it works in schools using research. You know, as a researcher, I was very dedicated to that, and that's something that I told even Enzu and Steve, you know, earlier in my career when I was being trained in solution-focused brief therapy, that I would like to see an evidence base come around solution-focused brief therapy. So that is one thing I'm really proud of, is what we've been able to do in terms of doing research in different settings, but especially in school settings, because, you know, I had the belief really as a therapist, as a social work practitioner, that the best thing that I could ever do to help a young person was to help them get their education. I believe that. That's very important in the United States. You know, you can't get out of poverty, you can't get a good job. And I think that's true in a lot of places in the world if you don't have a good education. So I saw the solution-focused brief therapy as a method that could be very useful that way. So, you know, I went from the very beginning and, you know, tried to do studies on it. And one of my expertise as a researcher is to do systematic reviews and what's meta-analysis. And that's where you can take evidence from a lot of different outcome studies or randomized clinical trials, sometimes we call them, or experimental design studies, and put it into an evidence base where all these studies are reviewed together. And so that's, other than actually doing studies in schools, that's what I've been doing also, is trying to put this evidence together and put the studies together into one place so that practitioners and therapists and counselors and teachers and other people could also admire the evidence base of solution-focused brief therapy. So Johnny Kim and I did a review, you know, of 7 studies in 2009 that was published in a journal, and people are most familiar with that. But more recently, I worked with a team of people, including Johnny Kim and other students of mine, to take the evidence base across countries. Because one of the great things that's happened with solution-focused therapy applications in schools is that it's across the world now. Now, it used to not be like that, but it is now across the world, and that's challenging with the different languages and all that. But what we did in this latest systematic review and meta-analysis that we did inside schools is we took the evidence from the United States, China, Japan, and also from Korea. We got all the studies, we gathered them up, and then we looked at the evidence of it. And we have one article out of that now that's under review in a journal. And in the first article we did, we couldn't put all the evidence in one article because there was too many studies in too many countries. So we took the studies in the United States and we took the studies in China first, because it's been used a lot in China. I did training in China with schools, and it's been used a lot there. So we had a lot of studies. So we took the evidence from China and the United States, and we, you know, put it in an article. And so, to your point, we were able to speak to who more and what, you know, was going on in these interventions too. And so what people most like to know is, well, how does it work in schools, or who does it work with? So what we found is that overall it works in all the studies, you know, in schools. And we also found that it works a lot with people that have what we call internalizing disorders, which has been found in other studies too: depression, anxiety, stress, and then also works with like concrete social problems. And this would be things like attendance problems, and, you know, kids are dropping out of school, if they're having some kind of social difficulty, that's keeping them from doing well in the school. And so we found that it was a very good intervention for, school social workers, counselors, teachers to use in those types of situations in schools. So that's some of the things we found in the evidence. It works really with adolescents. There's more evidence for it with adolescents as far as that's the who part, than in young adults than there is, with younger children. That doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work with younger children, but it means, that we have more studies that show that it's effective with adolescents and the young, we call it transition age children in the United States, where they're transitioning out of high school or out of adolescence into young adulthood. And there's more evidence for that. So there's a lot to say about it, and I am a professor, so I have to stop talking. You'll have to edit some of this out. But
it's beautiful to listen to you. So
yeah. So
and listening to you, there is one question I would love to address, namely, what for should practitioners read those studies or at least know about those studies?
We have nuggets of truth or nuggets of information that a practitioner can use. And that's usually in the discussion section. These meta-analysis studies can be complicated technically and from a research standpoint, methods, unless you're trained in statistics and things like that. But one of the things I try to do is write it, at least the discussion section, where there's some takeaways for practitioners to use. Honestly, the thing that they don't like about researchers and the way they write a lot of times is because we have to tell them, nothing is absolute, that there needs to be more studies and there needs to be, we're not certain, and they want more like, we want to be certain. We did a 10-year review of the solution-focused brief therapy. This was overall looking at all the evidence. And, we use words like promising, but actually we have a lot of studies on it, But one of the practitioners wrote me and said, I wish you hadn't used the word promising. And I wish you'd used the word, more certainty. But honestly, researchers don't talk like that. And I think that fits with solution-focused therapy really because it is a constructivist model. And, we know that, knowledge is not certain. We can't act like knowledge is certain. If we acted like knowledge was certain, then we would say when youth are failing in school and teachers said they're not going to be going anywhere in life, then, that's the way it's going to be. So we can't really talk like that as researchers. We don't talk like it's certain, but we do give the takeaways and we do try to communicate that this is a strong evidence that we have, and it's a building evidence that we have about the solution-focused brief therapy in schools and, in many other settings too. So I hope they'll read the discussion sections and be able to do that. When we write books for practice, we can make it simpler too, some of the findings, and we can put more case studies and things like that. That helps practice.
And I'm certainly sure that they contribute to really show that solution focus makes a difference if you have to talk with someone. If there is the question, can we apply solution focus in our school? Can we try out new things or ask our kids exception questions instead of other things? And working towards a solution focused school, for instance, here it could be very helpful, I guess.
Yes. Well, of course, the books we wrote, like that solution-focused brief therapy in schools book that I wrote with Johnny Kim and Michael Kelly, and the solution-focused brief therapy in alternative schools book, that's all about practice and cases and how to do it. And in fact, the reason we wrote the solution-focused brief therapy alternative school book is because all these visitors that came to Garza High School that we were talking about earlier, asked us, we need a little manual. We need some kind of way to see how to do this, to see how to develop another alternative school or another school that would be like Garza High School. And so we put that together like that. It took me 3 years to develop that book because we went into Garza High School and talked to the teachers and collected their stories in the teachers' own words about how they used the solution-focused brief therapy at Garza. And that's what the solution-focused brief therapy in alternative schools book is really about. I think it's why it's caught on in different parts of the world, too. It's being translated into several different languages because it is very how to do it, and it's for practice. It's not just a meta-analyses or research that's kind of hard to read.
And there's another very practical review you did about the WOW program and the studies done with the WOW program. And the WOW program is a very clear program, can be used in schools. And we were thrilled when we saw that and also saw the effects that you saw in your review. So could you tell us a little bit more about the differences a WOW makes or can make in schools?
We did do a literature review on it, and this is kind of interesting, and we did an RCT study. It was really a person that was mentored by Lee Schultz, who, worked within Zuckerberg to develop the WOW intervention program. Laura Wallace, she was a marriage and family therapy student, and she needed some help with her data analysis and with her study to be able to get it published. And so myself and my doctoral student, Audrey High, got involved with this RCT. It's the first randomized clinical trial that's ever been done on WOW. And I think everybody knows what WOW is, but I'll say it's working on what works, and it's a classroom management intervention, in school settings. And so this was published in the Journal of Marital and Family Therapy just recently. And it does have a review of the studies that have been done on WOW, and they are growing. But this was the first time that someone tried to do, a study with an experimental design on it. And we did find that it was effective with the attendance of students, their attendance. Now, if you look back at why WOW was developed, you will see that was one of the main reasons it was developed, to try to impact the attendance of students. And there's other reasons why we use it in classrooms now to make the classroom better and improve the classroom climate and teaching there. But in this particular study, what really stood out as effective was the attendance. But yeah, if you're thinking about the solution-focused brief therapy in schools book, we do the WOW in there, and we do try to look at the classroom performance. The self-efficacy of teachers, and there's lots of different studies that look at WOW in different ways in the classroom. How it can be helpful. And all the teachers, even the study that I'm referring to that was in the Journal of Marital and Family Therapy here recently, we had the scaling data from teachers, and they all liked WOW and, thought it was useful and helpful to them in the classroom. So I'm very happy about that, because we want to see WOW continue to have studies on it and grow. And it's being used a lot. I think really, Elfie and Dominic, it's being used a lot in different places in European nations.
Yes, it is. And we actually also know that it's a lot of teachers who sometimes, even in not I guess there are not so many solution-focused schools. We know some of them. So there's one primary school in Austria, which was led by Andreas Wurzreiner for quite a long time in Tyrolia. And he built a really amazing school. We visited, I think, 3 years ago before our journey, and could spend a day with the kids and Andreas, which was amazing. And then there is one school in Germany we know. They really apply solution focus in school, and actually it's a social work alternative school, and they apply solution focus with the kids but also with the teachers. So it's everywhere, which is really nice. And I'm also aware of a lot of teachers who took solution focused trainings and bring it to their classroom, and they sometimes go to other classrooms to do the WOW there to support other teachers who have troubles in teaching in their classrooms. And they all actually just tell stories that it makes a difference. Actually, I had the honor to do that with a colleague of mine in Austria once, to visit a class. It was, I think, like 13-year-old pupils sitting there, and we don't call it high school in Austria, but it's like, the junior high school level. And they had really a lot of things going on there, according to the teachers. And then we were in there, and I will never, ever forget that it was the German teacher. And after the class said she never, ever experienced this class like that before. They had so many amazing interactions, and she was crying because she was so touched. Before we did the WOW, she didn't want to go into the classroom anymore. And afterwards, she was like, I don't know what happened. Well, she then told the story that it's about us being in the classroom, which I'm very sure that this supported the whole dynamics. And they also noticed a difference after our visit. So it was not only us, it was maybe different kind of focus and interactions in the classroom.
Yeah. That's pretty much what you hear when you talk to people once they have a school like that.
And what I also loved about it was that afterwards, when we worked with the teachers, they had a very interesting insight. When they came to the teachers' room after having the class, they often complained about the class. And that's one of the things they noticed when we worked with them for an hour. And they just highlighted that they want to foster a different kind of dialogue in the teacher's room. And they developed a board where they just marked all the positive things, or the things that worked, the things that were useful for each other. So the math teacher could see the notes from the German teacher and the history teacher and stuff like that, and the other way around. And that really helped them to hold a different focus.
Yes, there's just so many stories like that I hear from people that use the solution-focused brief therapy in schools or the WOW intervention in a classroom. And it really is shifting those conversations, so that it's the leadership and the teachers around students that make a difference. And I'll never forget this one student at Garza High School, and Garza works with a lot with the pregnant and parenting teenagers or adolescents too. And this one young woman, she had her baby, and it was a struggle for her, to graduate from high school. There's many problems if you have a baby and you're a single parent and you don't have any money. But in the course of her coming to Garza and working there with the teachers, talking over her challenges to get to school every day, the school social worker that was talking to her found out that she, brought her baby every day on a public school bus. Like public transportation, and rode for 45 minutes to get to Garza High School because they really don't have a school bus that picks up, students or transportation to get there. And when she found that out, she said to her, "That's amazing. Wow, you mean you bring your baby every day on a bus, to get here? How do you do that?" And she started saying, "I really want to make a better life for my baby. I want to graduate from high school. I want to be the first person in my family to graduate from high school and go to college. I want to make a better life for my baby." And so they used that all the time to compliment her in the school, and to anytime she'd struggle or have a difficulty, and the teachers and people would just go around and they would say, "Did you know she brings her baby every day on a bus? Do you know how determined she is? Do you know that she's able to do that and get to school?" And they would just say that in front of her, talking to one another. And I think that's like your example with the board. Writing things on the board is those types of ways of interacting with students, also with teachers, when they interact that way together. That just transforms learning environment.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm really touched by your story. And it also reminds me of one really important thing when it comes to kids in a classroom. So thinking about this class, after a few weeks, they noticed that things shifted back. And a group of kids came to the two teachers who accompanied them after we were there and asked them to come to the class again and to do something to kind of recalibrate them again, that they can work better again. And this was really stunning to me to see that if you have a good environment, well, I think kids want to have a good environment and they enjoy being in a good environment, and they basically also enjoy learning. If you have a supportive environment, that's so helpful.
Yes, definitely creating a social support around youth, educational support, emotional support is so helpful to youth. It really is. And sometimes schools don't do that. They tend to be a little punitive with youth, and they don't do that on purpose. But a lot of schools, at least in the United States, can be very control-oriented. They're large bureaucracies, and they try to control young people instead of invite them into the learning experience. And so that's why we put an environment differently. A solution-focused approach, I think, creates a different type of environment where it invites students in to participate in their own learning experience.
So Cynthia, looking back on your journey with Solution Focus and also with the research and also with working with Insu and Steve, we're very curious to also find out what their, role in your learning was and their support in your journey. So if there's one story or maybe two of how they supported you or how you worked together, that also might make a difference for other people out there.
Yeah, of course, I was very fortunate to know Enzu and Steve and work very closely with Enzu in particular in my work. And Peter de Jong introduced me to her, talked to her about trying to develop the research evidence around solution-focused brief therapy. So Enzu invited me to come to Milwaukee and bring my research team and be trained there. And so then when I got involved with creating the Garza High School, I told her, I said, I'm doing this. Would you like to help me? And she was so open and willing to do it. She often joked, that she was going to be the parent of a high school. Her and Steve both were going to be the parents of a high school, and she would say that. And so, of course, we had her at the University of Texas at Austin many times to do training with social workers. But now, she would just come and be at the school with me, training all the teachers and training the counselors and the social workers there and principals. And she was just really there from the beginning, I'd say from like 2002 all the way right up to near her death in 2007. And we were planning for her next trip. She came every year, once or twice a year, to the high school. And that's one of the things I really remember about her is her generosity that way, because not only did she want to be the parent of this high school, she did not want us to pay her at all to come there. And I do want to say that, to the solution-focused community, that to Enzu Kim Berg and Steve DeShazer, this solution-focused approach was not really about, making money or, it was really about helping people. I mean, she was so generous that they were both trained in social work, of course, and she gave all of her time. We did not pay her, to just come and help me do the solution-focused approach like that. And so many times I'll say when people are being generous or they're giving things away or they're giving things toward solution-focused or toward the Garza High School, I'll say that's the spirit of Enzu, because it really was her spirit and it was very infectious. And I hope it's something that's inside me. I mean, we're dealing with a pandemic now in the world, and I would like to think that what Enzu and Steve tried to do is they tried to create a positive pandemic in the world, so that they could see lives transformed. And that's one of the great things I remember about her and remember about my work with her, as well as the fact that she was one of the most amazing therapists I've ever seen, work with people, and just amazing in every way. And if I can I tell you one more story about her, is that how she could work, her amazing abilities to work, is that when she came and she was working with the principal at Garza High School, the principal goes to your point earlier about how stopping complaining is helpful to people. But the principal would be frustrated because in those days, she wanted the Garza model to go out into the other parts of the school district. Now, it actually is very recognized by the school district here in Austin now. But in those days, it wasn't so much in the beginning, because it was just a beginning approach. And so she was complaining because people did not recognize it in the school district. And so Enzu told her a story. She said, we've been doing the solution-focused brief therapy. We had it at the Brief Family Therapy Center in Milwaukee, all these years. And she said, and just until recently, other people didn't know the state there, didn't really ask me to do anything in the social services there or anything. And she said, they recently called me up and they said to me, would you come and do this? And they said, we heard about you from California. She was in Wisconsin. And so I think her story really helped the principal. She was really able to help people and in general to not only do the solution-focused approach, but to help them stay on it, to continue to do it when they get off track.
Oh, what beautiful stories. And I would love to come back to the end of your first story, talking about generosity and talking about a positive pandemic. So connected with COVID-19, you together with a group of people created some resources that we are also excited to share with our listeners and everyone out there. Thanks to you. So we will put that in the resource section of this podcast. And could you say in 1 or 2 sentences what this is about?
Actually, one of my doctoral students, who's a clinical social worker, was supervising all the social workers really in Wuhan, China. I mean, right in the first epicenter of the pandemic, he was there doing that online. And so he got myself and Jack Nowicki, who is a solution-focused trainer, practitioner, educator here in Texas too, and teaches at the Steve Hicks School of Social Work. And we did a crisis intervention training way when found out that they didn't have any crisis training. And so we did solution-focused crisis training and sent it into China. And then it's been done in different places here in the United States now, too. And we have it on our website at University of Texas at Austin Steve Hicks School of Social Work. It's free. I put it out in social media free so that it would be helpful to people, that are going through the crisis in the world now. And that's my way and our way, trying to create a positive resource. And I hope passing on the spirit of Inzu, her generosity, in the world.
And you'll find all those resources in the resource section of our podcast. So go to www.sfontour.com/simplyfocuspodcast. And now let's come to the challenge of the week.
The challenge of the week. One of the things I like to do, with people, and especially in difficult dialogues, is to just ask this question. When I get to know you better, what will be, something about you that I will really come to admire? And so I hope the challenge of the week would be, as you're living with your family in this pandemic, in the houses, where everybody has to be cooped up together, you're educating your children, that when you get irritated or stressed out by your family members, that you will, ask that question, or you'll think that question yourself. When I get to know you better, when I remember what I like about you, what will I come to really admire about you?
And as we got to know you better, we really got to admire your dedication for solution focus and also for research and for putting research out there and showing that solution focus is evidence-based. And maybe you cannot do it, but we can say very clearly that solution focused brief therapy is evidence-based and that it works. And that's also thanks to you and all the people you trained, all the students that are out there now, all the things you did for the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association and the research committee there, the long work, the hours you put in there are really paying off. All the people that are on there now that were influenced by you and that you support. And it's really this dedication and this generosity of sharing your knowledge, helping people to get research out there and really promoting solution focus in this way. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you. Enjoy talking to you very much. And I hope we'll see each other again soon at one of the Solution Focused Brief Therapy Association conferences.
Yes, the next one will be in Las Vegas.
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you very much, Cynthia. And we're now curious to hear from you what inspired you in our conversation with Cynthia. What differences do the things make for you that you heard? Please comment in the comment field of our podcast on www.sfontour.com/simplyfocuspodcast. And you will also find there all the resources we mentioned, the links to Cynthia's books and publications, scientific articles, and the course. So please go and check it out.
And we're really looking forward to visiting you in your beautiful home and beautiful surroundings. And also go to Garza High School next time when we're there.
Can't wait to see you when we get past this time.
Have a wonderful week, everyone, and hear you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Wow, what a great episode again. This was Simply Focused Podcast with Elfie Cherney and Dominic Godat. Your podcast for a life in joy and ease.